I'm ready to slash and burn.
No quarter. I am going to be uncomfortable and all over you from start to finish.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Outside of the Box. And this is an episode that has been some time in the making, but I'm really excited to have the opportunity to do it now and have an episode with the champions of the last season, Team Tantrum. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us. We're really excited to be here. So
Yeah,
it has been a while in the making. So.
Yes. Yeah, we have a lot to talk about. You know, I kind of want to start by taking a trip down memory lane to talk about where we got to today, because Tantrum, you know, as people know, wasn't always a bot that people like feared or looked at or anything like that. You know, we go like back in 2018, I think the thing that everybody remembers is the fight against Battle Royale with Cheese. That's a very vivid memory in a lot of people's minds. And, you know, that was, you know, an okay season. 2019 was an okay season. And 2020, I think, is really when people started to take notice. In that season, you beat both Bloodsport and Sawblaze, and then lost to the eventual champion Endgame. So that was when I was like, wow, like, where did this Tantrum come from? And that was a pretty exciting development to see. I mean, from your point of view, what do you think helped make the biggest leap from what those prior years look like to that season?
Yeah, I think one thing that people don't realize is how much you learn from just showing up for your first year. And like you see that with like Switchback recently, right? They showed up with a robot as new. Like it was like, you know, a little rough around the edges, and then they showed up now on season 7 here, and they just a whole different robot. It looks great. Like everything is turned up. Like the robot looks like it, yeah, it's just you learn a lot from going and showing up to the event and sticking around for a while. You kind of figure out what works, what doesn't work, when you can over engineer things, and when you need to take a step back and try to get things sorted out. And so like one of the big things that we did in season 5 now here, where we ended up kind of like coming into the scene, was that we took a step back and thought we need to make a really robust and reliable drivetrain before anything else. And so that's what we did. We went back to the drawing board, came up with a new drivetrain system, and obviously it worked out for us that first year. The weapon had a lot of issues, and so that's just been iterating on that since. So.
Yeah. Ginger, did you have anything to add?
Sorry.
No, I was just going to say BattleBots is really unique in the world of engineering to a certain extent, because usually when we design and build things, we have the opportunity to test them. In fact, people build their whole careers around that, sort of validating and testing systems and thinking of every extreme you can. But with BattleBots, I think there really is truly no way to know what'll happen until you get in the box. So as a brand new team, you know, on our side, I think there were just a lot of like what feels like really, really minor things that you truly would have had no way of thinking of without any experience in the box. And you sort of like literally double your sort of sample size from year 1 to year 2, right? Just having more failures. So I think it's about that, and also about sort of wanting to do something different, sort of like, yeah, I think that as well, right? We had all these extra degrees of freedom and all these new ideas that nobody else had done before. And I think those also, of course, took time to just fix and iterate.
Yeah, I mean, it was an outstanding season. And I think that was when, you know, just with the wins, you know, naturally, I think fans take more notice. And I think when I watched that season, I really appreciated like the unique design and the, you know, the weapon and everything else like that. And because I'm naturally drawn to robots that have something that's different than other robots. And so, you know, I thought that was kind of nice to see you have some success in that season. And then, of course, carrying over into the next season. Now, World Championship VI, I think that a lot of people given how dominant Endgame had been, made the assumption that they were going to win again, which I can't blame people for thinking that. I mean, they have like an amazing killer robot, so that makes sense. But then Tantrum just went on this phenomenal run that season that was absolutely insane. And I want to talk about a couple of those matches in particular, not just from the actual giant nut portion, but then also from the Golden Bolt tournament. Naturally, we need to kind of talk about that Hydra fight, because it's one that just the thorn does not get removed from anything. It just kind of keeps coming back.
I mean,
And yeah, it was like,
we
it
still
was
have the
such a
giant
close
nut.
fight.
You know what I mean? I don't feel a thorn in my side personally. Like, I feel pretty good about how we did and where the giant nut is. So
that is very true. That is very true. I mean, it was a very close fight. And I've talked to the judges in detail about this fight. I specifically wanted to bring this one up because it kind of always goes back to the judging. And I think that the explanation that I was given by them made sense to me. I'm not an expert in robotics, so I mean, I can't say, but I think that it made sense that they're not just looking at one thing. They're not looking at how many times the robot was flipped. They're not looking at any of that. They're looking at damage, and all of these different things. And when they looked at all of that combined, they came to the consensus, individually / together, that you had won that match. And I mean, really the fact is that, like, no matter if anybody else believes otherwise, you won officially and you have a giant nut. So it's, that's kind of how I see it.
And it is really interesting to kind of think through like what those judges have to do, because the rules changed this year for season 7, and I think for the better, right? Being able to review a match and being able to dispute what you think is the results, perfect, awesome system, and the implementation I think was really well done here. We might see it here in a few episodes. I don't think any have happened yet, so look forward to that, because I think it's a good process and it's a good way to make sure that like they got everything right. But it is interesting because the judges, especially in season 6, had to judge everything live, right? They only get one shot. They only get to watch the match once from their side of the arena, right? And it's a very like specific set of circumstances that they have with very, I would say, low information that they have to make that judgment call on. And so when you're sitting there watching a YouTube fight, frame by frame to figure out who you think wins and per the judging, like keep in mind that those judges didn't have that at their disposal. They had to make a call at the moment. So it is interesting to think through and read through the rules, and then it opens the discussion of like, what should the rules be? How should this be ruled? Because like, yeah, it is a really, really close fight. And it's interesting how the sport has evolved since then as a result of that fight.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of several fights that I think prompted a lot of the changes in the rules. One thing that struck me though, talking to the judges about this, is that it doesn't seem that after they've had time to reflect and probably had time to watch that match multiple times, that they feel that they made the wrong decision in that. So I mean, I think that does say something, because most of us, I think, are willing to admit that we didn't see something the right way sometime, but it's kind of still in their minds that it was the right call. But you got through that match despite everything, and then of course went on to beat Witch Doctor for the giant nut. And I'm sure you've talked about this plenty in in interviews and everything else like that, but this far into the future, reflecting, how do you feel about it today, like having that moment and having that magical season that you did?
It feels pretty surreal. Alex and I talked about this some, and I think because we were new co-captains going into the season, we just wanted to get a few wins, maybe 1 or 2, and then it started snowballing and we kept like not losing, so we were like, oh my god, okay. And then it was like pretty much like our eyes were only on the next fight ever ahead because there was so much to fix in the pits. It was really like, can we get a fully functioning Tantrum into this next fight? It wasn't like, oh my God, at 3 fights we could win. It was like, oh my God, like if we don't work really hard right now, Tantrum's not going to be able to have a spinning weapon in like the next 30 minutes. So I think it like therefore took a while to sink in when it happened. But also like the finals to us also happened in slow motion at the same time because we had peeled back their belly pan like so early that it was like our fight to lose at that point. So it was like sort of standing there being like, oh my God, like me and Alex like giving each other like a little side eye, like.
Yeah, did we just become BattleBots world champions? And we
But
still
then
had
it's like,
2 minutes on the clock.
I know, but
Right?
then it's
And
like,
so
no, Dylan, stay focused. like don't freak out.
but yeah,
I was
oh, go ahead, Brian.
I was just sitting there the whole time as the weapon operator, like, I don't know, it seems like it's going good, but I'm still gonna try and hit anything that comes in front of the weapon there. And
yeah, that's your job. We did a great
like,
job. We put on a good show.
Like, why isn't everybody like saying we need to hit them more or something? Like they're still moving. Like, what are we? But I think other people had more higher level thinking going at that time than I did.
For context, Brian is our weapons operator. So during the match, he has tunnel vision on the weapon and he just wants to hit stuff. And so sometimes Alex is like, yo, Brian, chill.
Or sometimes I think we got to hit more. You know, it's all about thinking through the match. And that's usually my role, by the way, in our fights. Like neither Ginger or I drive the robot. I'm usually the person sitting and looking at the how the match is developing and deciding, hey, like maybe we should calm down a little bit because we have this one in the bag. So but yeah, it was a really surreal moment, I think, at least for me. I'm sure for just about everybody up there. It was a really weird feeling to go from this like extreme high stress leading up to that fight, right? Going through all these fights, the stress of like what happened with the Hydra match, knowing that there's going to be more stress in the future regarding the Hydra match, and just kind of just making it through and getting the nut at the end was definitely one of those moments that, I mean, it's like you'll never forget that, right? It's like a life achievement right there. So.
Yeah, I will also say that definitely for at least a few weeks, I was feeling a bit frustrated with feeling like people were trying to delegitimize our win or take that away from us in any way. I think especially Alex and I being like new faces, new captains, and sort of what our team was representing, that was really a pretty crappy feeling. And I felt it was pretty unjustified. But I think what I really learned this year was that like people on the internet are actually a very, very small cross-section of fans who watch the show. And anytime I talk to someone in real life or we have viewings with real fans in person, there's just an outpouring of support. And I think people really loved how it went and are in general really happy. So that's how I feel about the season right now. And I'm really glad with sort of how it went. And I think it's probably one of the coolest things I'll ever do in my life. So.
Yep. Yeah, and that goes true even for people that to my face think, say, I think Hydra won that fight. It's like, by all means, right? Like that's your opinion. At least we can have a respectful conversation about it and how the rules should work and develop as a result of that. And so it's been interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I kind of think that in that season that having that like appeals rule could have really been helpful in situations like that, to say, okay, like we've reviewed it, and after we've reviewed it, we still feel that this is the correct result, or that it's not, whatever the case may be. But I mean, that really gives that perspective.
I mean, sometimes nothing is ever enough, but I think hopefully in this season it did make a difference to at least some people.
Yes, and we will certainly see how that plays out. So yeah, like coming off of that season, and to be honest, like I said, as someone who's watched this for a long time, I think that season it was like a mixed feeling for me at the end, because I was so happy to see a team like Tantrum, who in a way is obviously seen as like an underdog team and kind of came out of nowhere, win something like that. But then just a lot of the yuck stuff online for, you know, the way that some of those matches went. It made me sad because like there's just, you know, you can disagree, but there's no need for a lot of the stuff that happened, and it was really unfortunate. You know, but then going into the Golden Bolt, which was like kind of where I think there was so much good stuff in that tournament. I was really excited about a lot of what I saw. I think it was, you know, some of the best BattleBots matches that I've ever seen. I'm curious though, because obviously for you, you kind of had to wait until the end of it because all of, I mean, well, not really, because I know how filming is working and they're kind of running at the same time, but I mean, that last part was like probably, I'm guessing, the final day or something that all of that
It was all the final day. Yeah. So like for some context, they filmed the entirety of Golden Bolt in the last day of filming, where they also do some filler episodes and stuff. But the second to last day of filming is the Giant Nut tournament finals, and the semifinals as well. And so we had come off of fighting. Normally, I was also, for context, you on average fight probably once every day and a half, right? If you divide your total fights by how long you're there, right? So you probably, you know, you have a lot of time to fix robots usually. But going into the Golden Bolt, we had just finished the night before, you know, winning against Hydra and Witch Doctor. And immediately after the Witch Doctor fight, being told, all right, wake up nice and early. You got to get your robot ready to go fight Tombstone. So
Yeah, I actually have sort of a funny story about that. Oh wait, I'll wait and I'll tell you guys later. I just realized I can't tell you the story, that it's a spoiler. So
okay. Yeah. We'll wait on that. But yeah, like I think that the fun thing though about that like final tournament for me is that number one, you got to have a rematch with Tombstone, which was awesome because obviously the last fight ended up spectacularly with the whole fist in the glass thing. You know, it didn't quite happen that way this time, but it was still an awesome fight to kind of start that tournament off, and I'm sure that it was like just a fun thing to do to go up against Ray again like that.
yeah, it was like the capstone, like, you know, of the Tantrum saga here, right? Is that like we opened with that being our memorable moment, and so to come back and be like, yeah, we've evolved and upgraded. So
The previous time Tantrum fought Tombstone, Ray actually came up and looked at Tantrum before the fight. He's like, that thing looks like a brick. I'm gonna go put it on a shorter blade so it doesn't break. And
Yeah.
this time around, yeah, wasn't short enough.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, it was great to fight Ray again. We were really excited that was the first draw too, because like we do better against horizontals, right? Like our robot's a brick, and so horizontals don't scare us as much, even if they are Tombstone. And so it's like, all right, you know, picking your poison between Tombstone and like Endgame as a first fight after having gone through the gauntlet of the main tournament is nice to have a horizontal again.
Yeah,
So.
and I'll be honest at first, like, but before I knew what the matchups were going to be, I was telling myself, oh, there's no way, like in the first round, they're going to have the champions all fight someone who's gone through this gauntlet. They're not going to have two of them fight each other. And then afterwards, I was like, well, of course they're going to have Tombstone and Tantrum fight. Like, of course they're going to do that.
Right.
Having two champs fight each other, that'd be brutal. So, yeah.
And I think they also knew it was kind of completing the Tantrum story arc, so I appreciated it.
Yeah.
So.
And so you went from that to Endgame, who, you know, had been sitting a little bit longer than you guys and probably had a little bit more time to be prepared, but obviously we all know that their robot is a killer as it is. So that was an unfortunate draw for the next round. You know, but
How it goes. That's how it goes.
It-
You have to
it
fight
is-
them eventually, right?
Yes, exactly. I was almost kind of rooting for Ribot to beat them again because they had beat them in the past, and I was like, oh, they can do it. And then I'm like, oh.
Not
You
today.
didn't put enough karmic energy into that fight, clearly. Got to work harder next time.
Yeah, well, you know, like next time I'll be there live so I can actually put the karmic energy in,
Yeah.
whereas I was not there live for that, so I was watching a recording. So
All
I
right,
could
we'll be counting on you then next
Yeah.
game.
exactly. So yeah, like that was, you know, it would have been nice to get both, but you know, it was still a really successful season by all accounts, I would say. You know, and then coming into World Championship VII, which is what's airing right now, and there, you know, there were a couple of things with that first match. You know, number one, it's Minotaur. Number two, I know that, you know, you had made some changes to your robot, and, you know, I just recently talked to Calvin Eba about this, that it's like there's risk reward. Like you make changes and you don't know for sure how that's going to go, because we all know that about BattleBots. Like until you get in and you get in a match, you're not really sure. And you know, I know Minotaur also made some changes as well, but obviously that was a pretty brutal match. Daniel did not come to play. He was in it like he normally is. So kind of like take me through that. And I'm actually curious as well, because I was thinking this, that, you know, they've never done this banner reveal in the past. I mean, they've never had banners before like that. And they decide to do it right before the match. Did that like throw you off at all, because they were, you know, doing this thing and kind of getting caught up in the moment?
No, not at all. It was actually a lot of fun to have that happen right before a match. I don't know when else you could have done it, right? It would have just been kind of forced, in my opinion, right? And so we kind of knew it was going to happen because we all walked over to the arena and just like, wait a second, there's a banner up there, and one of them's covered up. Obviously, like knowing that we get a banner and whatnot. And so no, it didn't psych us out at all. It was nice, and like the guys over on rivalry and everything, they I think enjoyed it too. It was a fun reveal, fun experience for us, and obviously now we get our banner up in the rafters, and like I couldn't be happier. The only complaint I have is that they didn't ask us if we wanted a copy when they were printing them. So maybe for next year we'll get one for our shop. So but the fight, yeah, leading up to the fight, the Tantrum was all new this year.
That's me and Alex have a quote that the producers, I think, were maybe growing a bit tired of, which was, Tantrum is a brand new robot this year, which is true. Like every single part was remachined. So
yeah, well, not just remachined, redesigned too.
Yeah.
Right. So everything is different. It looks like Tantrum, obviously that was the intent. But you know, we made some design choices, design changes that some worked, some didn't. Like we're happy with what the end result is. But some of those gremlins led us to not being able to get the robot finished as far as we wanted and tested before going to our first match. So going into the Minotaur fight, like we were racing against the clock to try to get the like self-rider arm fully functional. And yeah, just like you never want to be on the clock for a big fight like this, for like in the case of like getting the robot ready, right? Like you're stressed about the robot getting ready.
That's how we want a giant nut, Alex.
It's true. But like, yeah, I don't know. It's different, right? Because I think there is a new like there's an expectation now, right? Last year there was no expectation for Tantrum to go far. Like, I mean, yes, like semifinals from season 5 was great, but like if we matched or got around that, like that being the expectation, like nobody would have like batted an eye. But having won the whole thing now, it's like, oh, now you have to go knock Tantrum off their pedestal because they're the champs, and I'm just sitting here like, I just wanted one win last year.
Also, it was the first time running our brand new weapon disc, which was much bigger. and such. So that was also exciting. I think it worked somewhat. Like we definitely got
I
some,
think we got one hit on them.
but
Yeah,
it was also still spinning at the end of the match.
that is accurate. Like, yeah, Tantrum had some reliability issues for his weapon. Obviously, everyone saw them from season 6. So it's the big thing that we were trying to fix is trying to get the reliability up there for the weapon. And so, but we had a new attachment. You guys saw the swordfish. There's some changes if we want to run that again. I think obviously it didn't work quite how we wanted. It worked for the first few engagements, but then after the tip peeled up, like the match is basically over. And so trying to figure out how to beat drums is a kind of the goal right now for I think a lot of teams. So
Yeah, luckily there's not too many of them, but there's still plenty enough out there that you really have to watch for that. I think it's interesting though, like talking about the redesign, because a lot of fans, I think, look at a robot and they're like, oh, but it looks like exactly the same robot, but it's not. Because that was something that I talked to Junior from RioBots, Team Minotaur about, is that people were saying, oh, well, you beat Tantrum in this first fight, so if you had made it to the giant nut last year, then you would have beat them. But you don't know that because they were different robots then. So it's you can't really say, oh, it would have happened different in this other year, because they're so different.
Absolutely. I mean, every single, even the two exact same robots fighting again and again, you're not gonna get the same result, right? And so it's kind of like a statistics thing, or like a probability aspect, right? So like winning our fights throughout the championship run in season 6, like I don't know how, like I didn't feel like we ever had greater than like a 70% chance of winning any of those fights necessarily, right? And so they were all like, that's one thing about Tantrum is like it's not a super dominant champion robot, right? Like I'll be the first to admit that, right? It's not. It won a lot of those fights by the seat of our pants, and it ended up winning the giant nut at the end. And like that's how it goes sometimes, right? So it's not like Tantrum is this unkillable like bite force level champion that a lot of people view that robot as, but that's okay too, right? We still ended up getting the tournament win, and now it's just on us to try to get the robot in a position that we have the highest probability of winning fights in the future, right? And so it's there's so many different little aspects that you have to pay attention to be able to increase that number, right? It's not just how good the robot is, it's not just how good you are in the pit, it's not just like there's so many things that you can list off on and on and on again, but it's really just a matter of like any robot could beat any robot, and it's just a matter of trying to get the edge on them.
That is very true. We've already seen a few robots this season that traditionally don't have the best win-loss percentage do really well in their first matches. So you really don't know. One thing I love about Tantrum, because like you said, it's not a bite force type of robot, but it kind of fits my criteria for something that I love about combat robotics, and that's the ability to blend a really durable, tough robot that has, a good weapon with fun, like having the eyes on it and having the fists and everything. I mean, like that's fun.
It's fun. Yeah.
and I think that that's great, because I think that's part of it, and I think that that's what it should be. Not every robot has to be that, but I still love having that element in there.
Right, and that's part of how we went off. Like one way of winning BattleBots, if you will, quote unquote, is to like get a toy, is to get like kids in love with your robot, is to have fans come up to you. Like there's so many things about this sport that don't just involve going and destroying the other robot. And like the community is probably my favorite part about this, having the people come up to me and it's just like, wow, you did awesome. Like the most surreal moment for me, because I'm not super keen on cameras, was when somebody came up and knew my first and last name that I've never met before, and it's just like, are you Alex Grant? And I'm like, whoa. When that happened for the first time, it was pretty weird. So, but
Yeah,
it's how it
I'm
goes.
voting Tantrum Hexbug. That's
Tantrum.
what I want.
Me too. Me too.
I think that would do very well. So if the folks that make those are watching, please do that. But yeah, you know, that was definitely an interesting start to the season, and I kind of talked about the schedule makers and the way that they do things. And, you know, when I first looked at them, like, oh, cool, the whole schedule's out. I can, you know, see what this is going to look like. Cause, you know, I wasn't there for any of this part of the filming, so I didn't know. And I'm like, of course they did Tantrum versus Hydra. Of course they did. And, you know, as of when we're filming this today, the most recent episode happened last night. And there was a whole like vignette before the final fight last night on, you know, the whole Tantrum Hydra thing and what could have been. And then after Jake won the fight against Rotator and was asked about fighting Tantrum, he said, oh, I'll just kick his ass. What do you think about that?
It's the sport, right? I mean, just like all the fans, like you're entitled to your opinion, right? Jake's entitled to thinking that the judges got it wrong, just like we're entitled to thinking otherwise. Obviously, everyone's gonna be a little biased on that, right, from our side and Jake's. But that, yeah, I mean, we got drawn against him. We knew there's a high probability of that happening for that rematch, and all we could do is, like I said earlier, increase the probability of winning that match as much as possible. So,
and I'm curious too, though, that like, you know, obvious, like you, whether you knew about those comments at the time or not, but obviously you knew about his feelings about the prior year and everything else like that. Did knowing that you were going to get that rematch, and like obviously like knowing that he and some other people, you know, may have felt like you didn't legitimately win before, did that give you like extra motivation? You know, obviously we can't talk about what happens, but like did you feel like extra motivation to win that match because of it?
I think to an extent. I mean, like you have to treat it like every other match, but like, yeah, there's a lot more, I think, on the line for this one. In that, like, losing this fight means that there's like a lot more people on the internet, you know, saying it just further delegitimizes like us being the champion, right? If he wins that fight, and if we win that fight, like obviously shows that it wasn't just a fluke, right? Like it's just a matter of like yeah, there's more on the line. But as far as how much it like motivated us, like I don't know, maybe we like spent a little more time sharpening our forks or like getting the wheels and nuts on the robot, but not any more than I think usual. I don't know if anybody else feels differently. So, but
Yeah.
it's definitely a high stakes match. It's definitely a high stakes match.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, and also like speaking of schedule making and stuff, then the schedule makers also put Tantrum up against Blip, which almost happened in the prior season. Could have happened and it didn't, and then, you know, it did this time. So, you know, again, like we can't discuss what happens in it, but like what was your thought when you saw that? Like, oh great, we get to fight the other robot.
Well, I think like what Alex said, what's fair is fair. When you come to BattleBots with a robot, you should be willing to fight any other robot in the field. That's how the sport works. So while it was, I think, bittersweet, it was also exciting in some ways, a bit of like a family reunion. And we were more than happy to go against Blip, like not, you know, no holding back whatsoever. And I think it would be cool to see other family dynasties fight it out, like with Adam and with the Waiachi family and all of them. Like there's no reason why it shouldn't be able to happen. I think that's one of the things you have to agree to when you bring more than one robot. That's my personal opinion. So I think it is what it is, and I think everybody's going to be super excited for it. Is the other thing, it makes pretty good TV, so we're more than happy to comply.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it because I haven't seen any of these matches, so I'm really excited to get to see them for the first time. You know, even though it feels like World Championship VII is just getting started, which it is from a TV perspective, we're already at this point. You know, now that it's been announced, there's definitely going to be a World Championship Season 8. And it sounds like it's likely that filming is going to happen in the summer, which is not that far away. How do you feel about the, you know, kind of quick turnaround time and what you have to do to kind of get the robot ready for the next year?
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. And I think we're also working on possibly some new things. So everything is sort of up in the air, and with such a short timeline, I think it depends on what we can get done and what we're happy with.
Yep.
So any possible combinations of things may happen.
Right. It is a quick turnaround though. It is
Yeah.
a very quick turnaround. So we're just trying to make sure that we, like I said, going into the Minotaur match, we're finishing the robot at the competition, and we never want that to happen again.
Yeah.
So.
Brian?
One of the things that we're been working on for next year is for the past couple years, we've been using these guys here to control motors, the heavily customized speed controller that we buy. We looked at it for next season though, and realized that the amount of work we were putting into modifying the thing we were buying was less work than it would be to just make one ourselves. So I've been working on full custom speed controller hardware, which has been a project I basically started while we were still at filming. I was starting to plan out stuff because I was in downtime. And since then, I've just been working on it pretty steadily, which has been a fairly large project.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting to be able to develop new hardware for not just ourselves, but for the sport. And so Brian is trying to lead the charge there. That's really exciting.
Yeah, Brian is sort of, I don't know, you can tell it yourself, Brian, but it's sort of funny. He's like a speed controller whisperer at the competition. Other teams will sometimes stand silently outside our pit, peering in, waiting for a window of opportunity for when Brian is available, so they can go, hey Brian, hey Brian, hey Brian, can you come look at my speed controller or my motors?
Yeah, I think there were, over the past couple years, including this year, there have been many teams that I've helped get their weapons spinning faster, get their weapon to spin more consistently, or get their robot to drive better. And it's just kind of, I'm curious about the physics of how motor controllers and motors work. I'm a software engineer, so I write software for my day job. And so kind of putting all that together to make robots do what they're supposed to is really cool. And getting to do it on lots of different robots is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Sometimes
awesome.
even, not for our own good, but for the good of the community.
And like I love that so much about combat robotics. You don't typically find that in any other type of competitive arena. I mean, obviously, like, people within a team will help each other, but it's not usually between teams or anything like that. And I mean, I think that that's so great because ultimately, as I've said time and time again, when you're fighting an opponent, you want them to be at their best. You don't want to fight somebody who's like disabled or like doesn't have everything right, because if you win, it feels that much better to know that you've beaten somebody at their best.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I mean, we're all here, we're all friends at the end of the day. Like, it's a community that, like, you want to foster relationships with, right? Like, and that's just part of the community is helping out each other, and like you said, making sure they're at their best, not even just from the competition standpoint, but like, you want your friends to do well, right? And like, that's just part of the game. So
I also, when I've seen rookie teams, I think one of the biggest differences between the rookie teams that are just there one season and then that's it versus the ones who come back with something better next year is how integrated they are with the community. Some people who as rookies are, talking to everybody and going and looking at other robots and asking questions and stuff. those people usually come back. The people that are just like off in their pit, not talking to anybody, most of them don't end up coming back.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to talk to people, I think, sometimes to learn, because sometimes, I think it really in anything in life, you can kind of get into your own little bubble and not see other possibilities of things that maybe you hadn't considered. So I think that's like one of the amazing things with the camaraderie and like sharing of, ideas and things like that. And yeah, I'm excited to see more of that. But not obviously not the start to this season that you guys wanted, but there's plenty more. I mean, the great thing is having 4 fights in the season for everybody, which is not something that has happened in the past. And I think that it just makes everything better, because everybody gets, the same number of fights, and you get more opportunities to maybe face some opponents that you wouldn't have otherwise. So I'm excited for it. I obviously know some things, but then there's a lot of things that I don't know. So I'm really excited to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, that was another really good change for this year as well, is the preliminary fights, everybody guaranteeing the same number, 4 fights. I think 4 fights is a good number. I mean, like, it's always a balance of like how many fights can you fit into the schedule, right? And I think they did a really, really good job with that as well. So hats off to BattleBots for getting the preliminary stuff sorted. And I think it's a really good product in the end as well. Like, I think it's very viewable, and the fact that like we're able to see Chris and Kenny talk about the next fights, or like the moment with Jake, right? Just this most recent episode, like he knew he's gonna fight Tantrum. The buildup is there now, and you have the opportunity to be able to talk about it. And I think that that's great for the show, and is a welcome change. So I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, it creates more of, a narrative and a story for the whole season, because these things are all known, and just little things like what they're doing with having builders come out during certain fights, like having, JMO come out and talk with Chris and Kenny. And, I know that that's something that's going to continue happen later in the season with, other members of teams. But I think that, a lot of the changes that BattleBots has incorporated for season 7 are great, and I hope that a lot of people are going to like them, especially the things like the appeals that haven't necessarily come into play, but we may see later in the season.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited. I wish you guys well for the rest of the season, even though it's already happened, so we can't change anything that happened. But yeah, but I so appreciate you finally being able to come on. I hope that fans are really excited about this episode, because I know that I am. And everybody keep liking, subscribing if you haven't already, comment, let me know what you think, all of that good stuff, please do. And there's like going to be a ridiculous amount of content coming this season, so please keep watching, and hope you enjoyed the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us on. This was a really fun conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely.